Susan, would you please call the roll?
Okay, roll call for Wednesday, November 3rd, 2010 DDA meeting. Gary Warren. Newcomb Clark. Russ Collins.
Here.
Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Lee Gunn.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Heathja.
Here.
John Lowenstein.
Here.
John Moa.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Splitt.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is a presentation on the Main Street Business Improvement Zone. Mr. Shaffron, we're happy to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. And actually, morning too, isn't it? Good morning, or good afternoon, or good day, whatever it is to all of you. Before Betsy gives the presentation, I just wanted to again thank the DDA profusely for the grant and for making the biz a reality. Here in the last couple weeks, we've officially started with the sidewalk cleaning. And for those of you who are up early in the morning, like 5:36, you'll see the events taking place. But the important thing is the reaction we've already received from the property owners and the people visiting Main Street area. It is a noticeable difference from Main Street to the Liberty to the 4th Avenue, where there is no service being conducted in that. So the work that's being done is noticeably different and being looked at and talked about already. This morning, we met with various departments of the city to start talking about the snow removal aspect of how we as the biz are going to be coordinating with the city in the various events. We're looking at talking about the amount of snow that would fall, the procedures that will be taking place, whether it be a 1 inch, 2 inch, 4 inch, 8 inch, 20 inch, and what those procedures we'll be doing both with the city as well as our contractor. So we're off and running, and we're again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we're hoping that we're all praying for a very light snowfall so we can have a wonderful demonstration. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Betsy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Good morning. Congratulations to those of you for whom congratulations are in order. Happy to see you. I wasn't really sure you would be up this morning. Well, it is noon now, after all. I understand I have about 8 minutes, so it's a personal challenge, but I'm sure I can meet it. I'm going to, I'm sorry to have blinded you temporarily without letting you know. I am going to pass around, this is ultimately what the blueprint will look like. It's about that big, it's got maybe 20 or so more attachments to come. I ran out of toner last night, so that's why the last couple of chapters won't be in there, but we're only going to take
I hear there's a problem importing that these days.
That's right, and there's not going to be, I'm not going to import it, and it's not powdered toner as far as I can tell. But you're actually not going to get copies of this because we're not going to murder that many trees for the process. It's going to be provided to you digitally, and we'll talk a little bit about what your options are for distributing it. So really brief background. You all granted that terrific award back in April of 2009. The petition was presented to City Council in October of 2009. Public meeting in December, the public hearing and council approval in January 4th, the election in March, and the operations of the governance. Ed mentioned that the street sweeping has just started in late September. I'm sorry?
Sidewalk.
Sidewalk, yes, I'm sorry, street, bad word. But the governance operation started in July with the assessment. These essentially are the legal steps required. There's really 4 thresholds to make a biz happen. And I think we met and exceeded all of them. But the goals for this document that is sort of wandering around, I think, are threefold. One is certainly to create an archive for the first biz in the city. Most bids have an archive. I'm not sure most bids share them. They're not asked to, but this was a great sort of strategic idea on the part of the DDA to produce this. It details the process for the next biz effort in the city and probably in the state, seeing as it's based on state legislation. And I understand a third goal is to reduce future grant requests to the DDA to help support the same kind of idea with additional districts in downtown in the future. The blueprint in general and structure is more show than tell. So of that document, maybe 50 pages of it is instructional text, and the rest of it is the kind of documentation we had to put together to make the biz happen. So it's deadly reading for the average reader, but if there's somebody who's going to take this on in another district, I think every T has been crossed and every I dotted, both in terms of the letter of the law, but also in terms of the spirit of getting a biz passed. The citations that are relevant to the sections appear in the section. and a whole copy of the law appears at the end. So one of the lessons learned is you'll become able to quote chapter and verse of this law before you're done. And each section has essentially a lessons learned. What did we find to be the most significant part of getting this stage or this threshold achieved in the biz process? The table of contents, again, generally also follows that sort of 4 threshold process, starting at the beginning with the acknowledgments of all of the help that it required to get a biz done, and ending with the kinds of additional support materials. Attachments appear in that document where they're relevant. So it's not just a boatload of attachments at the end that you have to sort of fish through. But there are some support materials in the back, media, contact lists, and the like. But as an example, this is sort of what you'll find within the content of each of those sections. So this building the foundation, for instance, is not a legal requirement. This is the sort of added value required to make sure your biz is enacted. And this is just an example of how one of those chapters would look, all of them ending with attachments. This one happening to have 9, some of them having 20, 22 attachments in order to get through certain of those thresholds. Now, before we talk about options for distribution, which is really your next step, and had my toner not run out, there would have been a section in the back of the blueprint, which will be in the digital version, about the big lessons that we learned in this process. And I came up with 8 from my notes. One is that you do have to know the law in detail. Somebody has to be the keeper of that information. And again, this blueprint is really going to help with that because it highlights which parts of the law you need to worry about at which times. You don't get to skip any of the steps. And while 4 thresholds is sort of onerous, I really appreciate that they're there because that means there isn't any way to really manipulate the law, just sort of pass a biz without the stakeholders knowing. So you don't get to skip over any of those steps. Building relationships early is the 3rd big lesson learned. And that's not just relationships with your property owners, it's also relationships with the legal entities who you need to have involved. So city council and the assessor's office, the attorney's office, the city clerk, public works when it comes time to be discussing services and service coordination. Making those contacts early, understanding where your common interest lies, really essential. Reaching out and listening for consensus with the stakeholders is really essential. The leadership had an idea what the services for a biz would look like, but talking to the stakeholders, and not just the property owners, also the business operators and the users of downtown, allowed you to find where those consensus items really were. And that's your first things first level of services that you provide in a biz. You have to keep communication going and going and going. It's not just a, oops, we better tell people the next step is happening. So that, I think, that the Ann Arbor Biz leadership did in spades was keeping that communications process going. And creating the fairest plan you can. It wasn't fun at the time, but we probably went through 13 iterations of what this assessment formula might look like. But that was because the goal was to find the fairest blend of a formula to get the job done. So I think testing and retesting your ideas, looking for that fairness equation is important. 7th is someone will have to serve as staff for this effort. There's just too many details, as you'll see in this book that's wandering around, for you to sort of shop them out on a volunteer basis to your property owner leadership. And certainly legal advice will be required. There's lots of legal documents in there, but cutting and pasting probably is not going to cut it for the next biz. Certainly not for the next biz outside of the city of Ann Arbor. And you have to pick those steering committee, which became an initiative here, leaders who are willing to work hard. And that's really work hard, not just at the meetings, but behind the scenes, particularly in outreach to stakeholders. So that's sort of it at the moment, 8 sort of big lessons that seem to play out in every stage of getting a biz in place, and which you should see both in those sections and at the end of the document. This really is the place where we hand this process over to you. We will provide a PDF format, read-only, again, discouraging the idea that you can just take out Ann Arbor Main Street biz and throw in somebody else's name and get the same outcome. And we'll provide one print and CD copies to you. But you get to decide, and not today, but decide soon in what ways you want to distribute that. So certainly it's available to be downloaded or read only from your website. I think the Main Street Biz Board of Directors is happy to look at being a host for that document as well, but it's really your document. That's your decision to make. We're looking at doing a presentation to stakeholders from the other commercial districts in downtown, perhaps on December 2nd, I think is tentatively set now. And maybe looking broader to provide this kind of leadership from your DDA to other DDAs in the state. So that's really what I leave you with, besides a document with 2 chapters that I didn't have toner for. But otherwise, we will be providing that electronic version in very short order, and you'll get to make those decisions. So with that, any questions or comment before I release you to the rest of your agenda?
Thank you, Betsy. We got a lot of value for what we put into this, because this was the idea, is not just to provide seed money for the one biz, but to provide the opportunity for others to take advantage of it too. And it's really a great service, and I hope that others will take advantage of it.
I hope so too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have our audience participation, and we do have 4 people today. So I want to reiterate what's on the agenda is that they're 4 minutes each, and they will be timed. So our first speaker today is Pat Colley from the city.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for having me here. We're trying to get the word out on a project that's under construction right now at the corner of 3rd and Chapin, here on 3rd and Chapin, I should say. And it's a new kind of pedestrian-only traffic signal called a HAWK. And HAWK is an acronym for High-Intensity Activated Crosswalk. Doesn't exactly fit there with the W and the K, but that's how it was developed. This project is something we've been working on for the past year plus with Michigan Department of Transportation. It's actually a pilot project for them on a state trunk line, since Huron's a state trunk line. And they've provided the majority of the funding, so it's been a positive project all around. What I really want to talk about is how it operates. Since it's new, we want to make sure that pedestrians know what to expect when they get there, and drivers know what to expect when they get there. When it's in operation, what you're going to see first if you're driving down the road is just dark signal heads will be up over the roadway. It'll kind of look like a Mickey Mouse symbol. There's just going to be three black balls up there on the mast arm. And this is kind of similar to what you might see at a fire station in some areas where it's an emergency only signal. It'll just be dark. When the pedestrian comes up, they'll see typical, if you're at a crosswalk and it has a signal, you're going to see an upraised hand. Means you're in the don't walk state, and there'll be a push button there for you to push to get a walk signal. When they push that, the signal will start to cycle around. It's going to have to get in the right timing mode, because it is going to be coordinated with the other signals along Huron. But when it gets to the right state, then what it'll start doing is flashing yellow. It's going to flash yellow at the signal itself, and there's going to be signs in advance of it that'll start flashing, warning you to prepare to stop. Kind of similar to anybody that's gone down Huron, going around the curve towards Palmer. It would be the same type of situation. So that'll flash for approximately 6 seconds. You'll have the flashing yellow to drivers. It'll then turn to a solid yellow, which means the vehicle should prepare to stop. And then it'll come up with solid red, meaning the vehicle should stop. When it gets to this point, that's when the pedestrian will get the walk indication. It will be providing about 7 seconds of that walk indication. And then what I'll go into, like a typical flashing don't walk, we'll have roughly 13 seconds of flashing don't walk. And coincidentally, at the same time, the vehicle indications are going to start flashing red in a wigwag. Where this is a little different, there's not going to be a green state. So vehicles at that point, when they get the flashing red, they can proceed through the intersection after they make sure that there's nothing that they have to clear the right of way for. When it ends, when it gets back to its state, again, it's going to go dark, and you'll get the upraised hand for pedestrians to cross the road. Like I said, right now it's currently under construction. All the underground work has been in. They're going to be doing the above ground stuff this week and expect to be done with it sometime next week. The official ribbon cutting will be November 17th for it, but it may be in operation before then, depending on whether they encounter any more difficulties that they've had. And I'll leave some brochures for anybody back there that can't see it. I only have a handful. And of course, you can go to a2gov.org, walk, bike, drive. It has a link to this and some other material.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
That's really cool. Our next speaker is Steve Kaplan. No, Mr. Kaplan. All right. Then the next speaker is Alan Haber.
Hello, folks. I think you've seen me before on behalf of the Commons, and the Mayor assures me there is no rush, but there is persistence. And we have continued in the community to talk to people what they would really like to see on the library lot, on the surface. And I've asked my friend Stefan, who's also going to talk, to develop some drawings, some sketches, which we don't have on the PowerPoint. I don't know exactly how to. You want that old? To show a basic view of how we see this land might develop to provide the facilities that people say they would like: green space, outdoor theater, outdoor stage, indoor meeting place, pavilion area for a cafe and quiet, a front porch for the library, a front yard for downtown residents, an interesting place to discover downtown, and really a place for community gathering. And that's what all over town people say. We need more community, we need a heart in our community, we need a focus, a center. And these are some imaginative drawings to stimulate the imagination. And I could note also that this is really how do we look at the ground level, and if there is down the road, which we haven't seen, actual facility to build something big there, build it 40 feet up on top of all this, but let the people have the ground. In any case, in the northwest corner, we would see putting a community meeting place and sloping the ground upward to make an amphitheater outside and a stage in the center near the light source of the parking structure. People want some kind of place of that. So I'll let Stefan talk more about the particular design. What I want to really emphasize is that this is a project that people all over town want to see. And how we get this back to the people to actually look at it is a problem. The Library Advisory Board has this in process with a consultant. We wish the consultant would actually be looking as well at the beneficial economic effects of a park, commons, community place like this in the center of town on all the periphery. And there are many, many studies that do indeed show that something like this is very beneficial for all around, and that should be in the consideration of the council when they actually come to look at that, in contrast to what the benefits might be of building there if that were ever actually feasible.
I wonder if I could say a couple of things.
Well, I get my 4 minutes, you get your 4 minutes, and then one of the ideas in this design that Stefan will talk about is to maximize the people space and subordinate the automobile space. So we do see building a platform or a second level above the library lane where it comes in from Division Street and goes down underground and then comes over to cover the roof of the community meeting building. And we would also like from the DDA that you must have in your resource a site plan and topo plan to see exactly what the grade difference are we here. It's about 14 feet from Division Street to Fifth Avenue. That is a grade that can be taken advantage of in the design of a ground level community green place. The Commons is really a idea of how the community can self-develop and self-manage and take care of its own land. And so while this is in one way a park, it is also a process of community building. And that's what I really myself keep coming here. I'm not a designer or that, but there's so much creativity in this community that could come together to make not only these designs that are in the imagination come to life, and so much money in this community. From the hotels and businesses that would like to see an interesting downtown place as a destination, from the university community that would like to see some complement to the DIAG in the downtown and the town-gown relation, and a place for the arts and green, which would be good forever. Anyhow, Stefan, I can hold for you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Stefan Trendoff. I'm relatively new. What I do for a living is I'm a conceptualist. I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm 62 years old, and I lived in Ann Arbor for the last 20 years, so I've learned a lot about my conceptualizing and master planning cities. I work for the Dubai royal family, the royal family of Qatar. I've done a city in Bulgaria and so on. A city, the evolution of a city is based on water. The evolution of a city is based on water. And from Africa, that is where a city evolved. As I lived in Ann Arbor and walked the street with Shaky Jake and the rest of you, I've noticed that there's a certain hardness about the city that exists, and we try to always make it greener by implanting trees that are perhaps immature and the canopies don't fully develop. This is not the kind of city we want to be. Historically, what I do is I overshoot. I always overshoot and negotiate down. That's just the nature of development. This is perhaps overdone, but what it's trying to say is if we get in a bush or a tree or some water, it's an asset to our city. This particular area, the concrete nature of it, even in a park, is just encapsulated with concrete. We need to bring green spaces. Now, this is designed so it does not interfere in any way with what's going on underneath it. All the accesses and all the light wells and everything is in place. It is also in place for that a development that's been proposed can go on top of that without disturbing this. All over the country and all over the world, people are starting to building 2 or 3 stories up, and they're doing whatever, housing, convention, whatever they want. It is not out of line for us to start thinking. The young people are getting very upset. The nature of our city is very, very not progressive. And rightfully they're upset because they travel to places like Paris or other similar cities, and they realize that with the increment of the city, even in New York, every so many blocks is a green area. This is the center of the city. Our city has been divided into 4 or 5 parcels. We don't consider the downtown our city. It's fragmented to 4 or 5 different places. It is time for us to conceive this as the center, the heart of the city, connected with the main brains, and then work on the other main brains later on. It is a hard concept to understand, but it's very simple. It's void of green space. And I'll just conclude with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we do hope we can get some maps or something that would help them move this to its next stage of the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is a report from city boards and commissions, and Ray Detter and the Downtown Citizens Advisory Council.
Last night's Citizens Advisory Council meeting included a very comprehensive and we thought very impressive update by Susan Polley of the many local and regional transportation initiatives in which the DDA is currently involved along with others. We also heard updates on the work of the Outreach Panhandling Task Force, as well as a report on the situation in Courthouse Square. But frankly, this particular point is not very promising, but I'm not going to go into detail at this particular point. But we are committed as a group to keeping downtown Ann Arbor a safe and welcoming environment for residents and visitors alike. We're working in both that panhandling group and also with Courthouse Square to make that happen. With Courthouse Square, it's not so easy. But last night, Steve Kaplan, who didn't come today to do a presentation, came to the Citizen Advisory Council. Steve owns a 30-unit apartment house on East Washington. It's directly across the street from 411 Lofts, that's student housing. And he asked our help in dealing with a problem that's been a concern for all of us for many years. That pedestrian vehicle passageway that separates his 30 units of residential housing from the Liberty Square parking structure. That Liberty Square parking structure, of course, extends all the way from Washington to Liberty. And what was the significant pedestrian passageway between those two streets? In the more recent past, that downtown residents hope would be used even more by new housing developments on East Washington, has become now an isolated, unpleasant, even unsafe passageway, almost closed off from East Liberty by an iron-fenced outdoor hamburger plaza, a tight 5-foot walkway, and a lot of unorganized dumpsters, trucks, and groups of kids hanging out in that space, to the point where nobody wants to enter it at night. And for those people who used to cut through it, they don't because the smell, if nothing else, will get you as you walk through. As a party to the condominium agreement for Liberty Square parking structure and that passageway, which the city has, I mean, they are a partner in that. That's a condominium relationship. It appears that the city of Ann Arbor is an accomplice in making what it is that has occurred happen. But we don't have any record of that. There's never been any plans submitted with regard to what's going to happen there. We just don't know what it is. And Steve says he's going to FOIA that information to see how it is that this all came about. But we on the Citizens Council have always opposed the closing of any portion of this long-time pedestrian passageway. Members of the CAC believe it is the interest of all parties, present and future residents and occupants of the downtown as well as in nearby neighborhoods, McKinley, State Street, and the entire community, that we have approved plans for the permanent future use and development of that passageway in a way that will help to vitalize the downtown, enhance the pedestrian experience, and add to the business success of the State Street area. And if we look back on the whole nature of this in terms of something that we're committed to, the original DDA plan of 1982 committed itself to improving a mid-block pedestrian connection, or generally mid-block pedestrian connections, and other downtown improvements that would, quoting from that plan, strengthen linkages between activity centers to produce more effective pedestrian and non-motorist movement within the district. The downtown plan of 1988 insisted that, and I quote again, downtown's appeal as a shopping and service center could be significantly enhanced by providing attractive shortcuts through development blocks in the form of open-air walkways, retail arcades, and atrium spaces, to improve pedestrian linkages between parking structures, shopping frontages, as well as linkages to adjacent neighborhoods. Community commitment to pedestrian linkages were repeated in various forms in the Central Area Plan of 1992, the Culthorpe recommendations of 2006, and most recently in the newly amended Downtown Plan, as well as all of the zoning and design guidelines recommendations that are currently emerging with regard to the nature of passageways in the downtown. And what I'm here today is to ask for is a carefully planned future for that alley that involves the entire community. We own a part of it. We should be involved in discussions with regard to the nature of what goes in it, not just suddenly get some helter-skelter sort of environment there that nobody seems to be in charge of. We own that half interest, and we need a plan that would be in the interest of all parties and not just the developers of the hamburger space. Thank you.
Thank you. Status of task force efforts. First, the Library Lot Advisory Committee.
I have the same thing to report. The committee has not met since our last board meeting, and therefore I have nothing to report.
Okay. The committee to discuss a mutually beneficial agreement with the city. Roger.
That's me. We have met actually a couple times. Continue to make progress, and I think we are at the point, we said we were at the point where we needed some feedback from council on where we are. So tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, there's a work session with council to discuss one aspect of that, which is the development part. And we'll be going over, making a brief presentation to council, and then eliciting feedback from council to see if we are indeed where the committee is, where council is. And then on the 15th, we'll be having a similar work session at 6 o'clock to discuss the parking agreement. And again, we'll give a brief presentation of what we are proposing for changes to the current parking agreement, and get feedback from City Council on that.
And I think, from my point of view, I think it would be great to have as many DDA board members as possible at both of these work sessions. So anybody who can attend, please do, and it would be really, really an advantage to us to do that. So that's at 6 o'clock in the City Council chambers tomorrow evening, and also on November 15th. And it's supposed to be just an hour, right? Just
Yes.
6 to 7, because
Yes.
then the regular
Council meetings after that. And then the committee will be meeting next Monday to probably put the final pieces together, hopefully on the parking proposal.
Okay.
I'm not sure that there needs to be a full hour. There's something else in there.
Oh, there is something else. Okay, very good. Even better. Thank you, Roger. I'd like to get approval of the minutes, which are attached to your agenda. These are the minutes from our October 6th meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And now, oops, just lost our microphone. Sorry about that. Subcommittee reports. And we'll start with the Transportation Committee.
Great, thank you. At our meeting last week, the focus of the conversation was looking at potential Ypsi Ann Arbor service with ATA. Chris White was good enough to come in and bring some information. You'll find in your board packets on pages 6 and 7, there are some tables that describe existing routes, possible alterations to routes that could increase frequency, hours, of various options. And you'll see as you sort of look through the menu of options, there are various costs associated with it and some other sort of information to digest. It's a lot to get into right now, but I think the focus of the discussion pretty quickly started looking at the Route 4, the main bus coming between Ypsi and Ann Arbor and Washtenaw. And one interesting thing that he brought as a possibility is the notion that instead of that bus going to U of M Hospital and then downtown, a possibility is out there to come downtown and then the hospital, just to help speed up that potential connection between the two cities. So that was an interesting possibility that would need some more research. Needless to say, for changes to happen, we need to look at what other partners could potentially be brought on board to look at any changes and see what folks think of it and those associated costs. Another piece to that is looking at increasing the frequency of the buses running between the two cities. Increase it, say, from 15 minutes to 10 minutes could make a pretty big difference. So that's sort of the one piece, is the linkage between the two cities. A second piece that he talked to was the notion of what to do on the Ypsilanti end to collect people. So that piece is, in my mind, a little more challenging. It's how to enhance the local routes on the Ypsi side to collect people, because folks are spread far and wide, and how that might work, and the dollars associated with that, and what it means to their system, including their number of buses, the type of buses they operate, and so forth, especially in light of their looking at developing their master plan. And so I think that these things have to happen hand in hand, but I appreciate the fact that Chris put a lot of time and work into it and came up with some pretty interesting options that we can move forward with. Chris is going to also be talking to Watts to see if there are any numbers that we can figure out how many of those folks who might take these buses actually work or play in downtown. So that's a piece too to parse out what's our piece of this pie. The other thing that you'll see in this package talks a little bit to night ride, that notion of what could be done in the evenings during the weekdays or weekends to enhance night ride service and look at those costs, that availability, and those options. So those, I think, are maybe the two that have come to the surface to be of the most interest right now to look at in more detail and see what it may be in cost ramifications. The other aspect of it is the idea of seeing if there's something we can do to provide something of a challenge grant to other partners in this, that put our foot forward and see what that might bear. So there are a number of things, I think, moving along in this direction that are pretty interesting, and we'll just have to see how these things evolve in this next few months. The other thing we talked about a little bit with Chris was Keith has been doing some nice work at looking at what are options for the circulator and the former link. And one thing that had been suggested was the idea there's an existing number 17 route, and that runs between the Blake Center and the Amtrak station, and whether there's a potential for modifying that or using that in some way to be, in essence, a de facto circulator. So one of the issues surrounding that was whether there are any possibilities of altering its route slightly to give a little more coverage to downtown. Well, it just so happens, Chris described to us that that right now that isn't a terribly successful route, but part of their thinking, their intention had been once North Quad was in place to potentially for them to alter the route to pick up primarily students to get them to the station. So they're in a bit of a state of flux with this one. But again, I think it's a really interesting idea. The idea that if there's an existing service that can be modified to provide people an opportunity and we can play a part in that. I think that again, and thanks to Keith for sort of pursuing that, and we'll see in this next few months again as they're looking at their county-wide service plan what changes may be coming that could affect the circulator. The other couple of quick things. I attended my first Watts Policy Committee meeting, and I've been joking to people it's way too many numbers and way too many acronyms for anyone to ever really enjoy. But it was interesting. I got a call from Supervisor Northfield Township with an interest in what could be done to help connect folks who want to come from Livingston County and do a park and ride lot to downtown. Now, whether it's something we're in a position to participate in, but it's again supporting the idea of regional transportation, what it means to our downtown. So it's a nice way to keep us connected to what's happening countywide. The last thing I have is there's a company named B-Cycle that has expressed interest in showing us their rental bike concept. And for those of you who've traveled to other cities where there are bikes you can pay to grab and ride from point A to point B, it's that basic notion. And they're going to come and do a little demonstration for us in late November, is that? And we'll sort of see whether that's another piece of the puzzle that might be interesting of how to help people get from point A to point B in our town. So that's the essence of it. I guess.
Will the bikes have snow tires?
And little roofs and windshield washers and. Any questions? Any other thoughts? Anything I've missed? Our next meeting, we're looking to do it 1 week earlier because of Thanksgiving, Wednesday, November 17th at 9 a.m. So that's a week earlier than we would normally do it. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
I had a couple of things if I could add about transportation. Thank you. That's all good news. On I think it is the 15th at 3 and at 6, and Susan might be able to get something out to us. There'll be a presentation on the work that's being done on the inner city connector that would link the central campus in downtown through the hospital complex and up to North Campus. And That's actually, they have some nice materials to present, and the study is moving along. So if you're interested in these issues, you might want to get that. And I believe it's 3 and 6 at the library on the 15th. So certainly an opportunity to see what's going on, so, and that's the longer-term vision of what might move people from one end of town to the other. And I'm sure you all heard about the rail announcement, the funding of, I think it's $153 million coming to Southeast Michigan area for what I think is more rightly called higher speed rail. But it'll certainly have a really good effect because it clears the way for the commuter rail that MDOT and the cities of Dearborn and Everett we've all been working on. The same track improvements are what we've needed for that. And just point you to, I think many people saw the study that, or the survey that came out of Crane's Detroit Business, where they talked to a number of business owners, 75% of who identified themselves right of center, and they were overwhelmingly in support of spending for better transit. So it was a very interesting survey. I thought that it pointed up some facts about the kind of universal embracement that that's what Southeast Michigan needs.
Okay, thank you. Next, Capital Improvements Committee, John Split.
On our South Fifth Avenue underground parking garage, we poured a lot of concrete last week. 300 yards were used to pour the first floor deck on the east leg, so we're already one floor up there. I mentioned on my last report that we were having some dewatering issues. Progress has been made in that area. The water level is dropping, which allowed them to pour another one of the mass foundations next to the library, and the tower crane will be constructed there. And it's going to be another week or two before they are able to start constructing the tower crane. And then things will start moving along briskly from there. Max excavation, I always have problems saying excavation, is 96% completed. And thus far, 240,000 cubic yards have been excavated and removed.
Dug out.
Yeah, dug out. Good word. Thank you. I'm going to use that next time. Construction on 5th and Division, we're 85% complete. The remaining work, and I think that will take place next year, is on the 100 block South Division, 100 block North Division. I think I mentioned last time that the city repaved 5th in front of the fire station. We've completed our sidewalk work there, so the improvements in front of the fire station are complete. And we're just about ready to wrap up for the year. The next couple of weeks, we have some miscellaneous street furniture installations, etc., and then we will be done until next spring. Question?
I was just remarking to Keith, those fire hydrants in front of the fire station are just fantastic. They're old, painted fire hydrants. They're painted gold, and they're great.
Yeah, and I think a lot of work and planning went into doing something special in front of the fire station. Can you tell us whose work that is?
Yeah, I'd like to give credit is due our new fire chief, Dom Lanza, and Mike Bergman, who's project managing 5th Division, took the Beckett and Rader design for that block, and they had a conversation based around what I call placemaking, but what they call the fire station needs. And what came from this was really centric to the fire station and the fire service and their sense of pride in their commitment to their jobs. The fire hydrants are the first piece of this, and this was something Mike thought of because he had been part of field services with the city. These are some of the old ones taken out of service. He's got his eye on one that I guess goes back to the 1920s. It's still in service, and if he can help with the swap out, we might add one more to the collection. But also coming, that hasn't arrived yet. He worked with the chief. There will be some pieces of granite installed. We may have to wait for spring when the weather gets warmer for the epoxy to hold. One piece will be a permanent installation that will commemorate the fallen firefighters. I think for some of us who, for instance, drive by on Jackson Road, you see the flowers and the commemoration. This will be the place where the commemoration is sort of makes more sense. It's at Fire Station 1. Their names and memories will be remembered. There will be behind it where there's a new planter installed, there is a prayer that the firefighters have. It's not a motto, it's not a slogan, it's a prayer. And it basically says, keep us safe as we do our job. And that work is being carved as we speak at Arnett's, and those 2 pieces of granites will be installed. And then at the far end, which is the piece closest to Huron, there'll be yet again one more small piece, and it commemorates, again, the work of the folks who do the emergency services. So that will, in its statement, and I'm not going to do it justice, it will also bring into mind the police, because this really is the corridor where our fire and police have their headquarters. And that last piece will, again, give thanks to those that serve those of us, so we can do our thing. They're there protecting us. So all of this was done in collaboration between the fire chief and our project manager, and is meant to give the fire workers, the firefighters, really a point of pride. You may notice already there are uplights at the flagpole, excuse me. The whole area has been cleaned up, and one of the last pieces will also be a new sign that restores the beautiful old bronze lettering. Right now there's kind of a more plasticky red sign. We'll have a restoration back to sort of the older look. So those are the details, and really credit goes to those individuals who worked hard on that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Our next meeting, and I should have asked you to stay up there because I'm hoping that our next meeting is going to include a tour of the parking garage site, and has that been talked about, finalized?
It has not been finalized, but with this meeting I can certainly certify it today, and we'll get word out to everybody it's confirmed.
Okay, I would like to tour one more time, have the committee tour one more time before the snow flies. So our next committee meeting is a week from today, November 10th at 11 a.m., and hopefully including a tour. But we will get that out to you via email.
Thank you, John. Our Partnerships Committee.
I
Sandy Smith.
defer to Sandy.
I defer to Keith, who was there.
And I'm going to pinch it for both Russ and Sandy.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah,
I thought
we
you were
have
going to defer also, and this was going to get a little too crazy.
Well, you were there. I could defer to you. Yeah, we have 2 co-chairs.
Just to be clear to the viewers that are out there, Sandy and I were both unable to attend that meeting, so thank you very much.
We have 2 co-chairs, and somehow we still needed to defer. Let's see. There were quite a few grants that we talked about. One is an ongoing one, which is the Energy Saving Grant Program. We had Dave Kunkel there, which was great because he also helped us in some of our discussion a little bit later on. The Energy Saving Grant Program continues. There's some detail on it on pages 8 and 9. Let's see. 71 energy audits have been completed. We are taking applications for the next season, which is, I believe we always had was it October 1st or November 1st date for these?
It was earlier.
Was it September 1st? I knew we pushed it back, and it's November 25th, is it?
30th.
November 30th, here we go, at 5 p.m. And the reason for that is just that it's been such a popular program. A lot of the auditors are backlogged, so by pushing it back a little bit, we're hoping to get caught up on some of the first 2 years' worth of audits. And if you look on page 9, through October 10th, there's been $2.5 million worth of installation that's cost that is resulting in close to $500,000 a year in energy savings. So that's a projected payback of 3.5 years on some pretty significant energy savings. So this is, without being a huge cost program to the DDA, it's having a profound effect on a lot of downtown folks. So we continue to work on that. As far as the rest of the meeting, we had 3 different grant requests come to us. And no decision was made on any of them, though, as I said, it was great to have Dave Kunkel there because he was able to help us out on understanding what some of them were about. One is the Shelter Association, which we had already done a grant request for, has come back about a solar voltaic panel installation there. It's nearly a $100,000 installation.
our concern about it is that it's a 29.2-year payback, which is nowhere close to what we usually look at. And even with the DTA rebate, it only reduces it to about 19 years. So nothing was decided on that, and discussion will continue at our next meeting when we have more people there, I guess. Also, the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, which owns 355 low-income rental housing units on 17 sites, and the Housing Commission are the folks who manage them. They came to us rather specifically about the Baker Commons facility up here, which in the course of some auditing was discovered that there were some things they had to address immediately, as well as a lot of things that as they came up they realized were just way behind the times and costing them a fortune in terms of energy costs. So they came to us asking for a matching 50% match for the public housing capital grant of $500,000 to be directed to the Baker Commons. Items including new windows, hallway carpeting, and parking lot resurfacing. Again, we had lots of questions, and we hope to get some of those answers back at our next meeting. And finally, there was a grant request for Exceed to do a solar demonstration installation on the side of the Michigan Theater. It was a $35,000 grant request, is that correct? What they're trying to do is get government grants, private donations into a solar bank fund for future renewable projects. So basically, the installation would provide both the savings as well as seed money that would then be used for the next project. We, again, had lots of questions about that and how it would work, and if DDA gets it, would have any sort of a payback in that as well. So that, too, has been deferred to our next meeting. Partnerships always has a couple of reports from folks who are on various committees that interface with us. So we have Tony Derenzinski, who shared some information specifically about the medical marijuana dispensaries and the work developing around zoning and licensing, because of course, as we all know, that came up without a lot of direction. And they're talking about radius restrictions from schools and other restrictions. Margie Teal also sits on our committee, said that City Council is receiving community feedback currently about the potential closing of Main Street during home football games. There are, of course, a lot of concerns about what that might do. So she was keeping us informed of that. And that's the summary of partnerships, unless there are other questions about it. Our next meeting is next Wednesday, November 10th, 9 a.m.
Thank
Can I
you.
toss it back to you? Who can toss it back to Joan?
All right. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Keith.
And finally, our operations committee, going back again to Roger.
Yes.
Come closer.
I also wasn't at the operations committee meeting due to an illness. However, I wasn't as fortunate to find anyone to defer to. So I'm going to wing it myself here. If we go to page 10, I believe, we'll look at the first quarter financial statements. I should emphasize the first quarter, there are, particularly now that we're in construction, a lot of numbers that are going to fluctuate quite a bit, because based on when both construction invoices come in to be paid and also when our reimbursement from the city from the bond that was sold, those payments come in. So things are going to look a little odd, particularly in the early quarters. But we'll review as much as we can here. Our TIF income looks like it is going to be slightly under, or we're anticipating it being slightly under what is budgeted. Year to date, we have received the bulk of the payment. There will be, which is based on summer taxes, there still will be a small amount coming in on winter taxes. But we anticipate those being within the variation being less than 3% of what was budgeted. Operating expenses, pretty much where we have anticipated them being at this point. Year to date is very low, but our year end, we're still not seeing any indication that we're going to be significantly out of budget on that. Capital expenses, also not much spent so far, although with the Fifth and Division project, we do anticipate, and we've budgeted for about $2 million in the capital expenses, and we still anticipate spending approximately that much. So overall, we are well within within a few percentage points of what's budgeted, at least at this point, with no indication that anything's particularly out of line, just the fluctuations due to the construction. Moving down to parking revenue, budgeted about $4 million. We're actually about $3.76 million in revenue. Most of that, if not all, can be attributed to the fact that we budgeted a rate increase to start on July 1st, the beginning of the fiscal year, but we actually delayed that rate increase until September 1st. So we had 2 months where the revenues were a little lower than we had budgeted because of that delayed rate increase, but still within 3% of what we had anticipated. Operating expenses year to date are actually negative. That has to do with the reimbursements from the city out of our bond fund. We essentially spend money and they get reimbursed, so expenses were higher than anticipated in previous financial statements. Now we've gotten that money in, and so we actually show a negative for this quarter. You know, that goes back to the timing issues. We anticipate spending approximately $10.5 million, and so we are within budget for those construction. And again, we're spending a lot of money on the down payment for the new parking structure out of the fund, which is why we had large fund balances to begin with. And as we had all looked at when we put this, these fund balances are going to be going down to pretty low levels, so we can make our down payment and get both the parking structure and, of course, the Fifth and Division project completed. Direct parking operating expenses, or direct parking expenses, again, we're within about 3% of where we are budgeted to be. Nothing unusual there. And again, large negative numbers because to pay down or drawing down our fund balances for the new construction. Parking maintenance, where we're actually going to end up paying for the parking structure out of the parking maintenance fund. And that's the fund that we'll be writing the checks for. But at the moment, so we have a large expense there. Much of that is due to payments on the parking structure. So both of these funds are going to look a little weird, but as far as we can tell, everything is about where we had anticipated it being. There aren't any big surprises. It's just a lot of fluctuations. And the housing fund, we have, I think we paid out, 2 grants, both to Avalon and the shelter. Yeah. So we've had some expenditures out of those, but again, they were approved by the board. So that fund balance is coming down, and that's why we are looking at large, expenditure numbers there. Joe and I will be glad to answer questions.
Any questions for Roger?
Yeah.
I want you to move ahead.
Okay. and the next page is essentially graphically showing where we are.
Let me just clarify, we're talking about a lot of documents and facts and figures, and these documents are part of our agenda, and so they can be accessed from the website. So people who might be following along have absolutely nothing else to do and are watching can go online and find these documents and kind of read along as we go along.
At what website?
At a2dda.org.
Thank you for that additional bit of information. I'm sure all our viewers are delighted for that. This is essentially graphically showing what the previous page shows in numbers. If everything were exactly equal expenditures throughout the year, we would, and equal income, everything would be at 25% right now. But obviously there are large variations based on the construction flow. Okay, more questions on that. We'll move on to the parking data. We have both a September numbers and quarterly numbers.
This is page 17, correct?
Page 20, I believe, we are right now. September revenues are up a little bit, attributed largely to the rate increase. Should point out, though, that the number of spaces that we have is actually down somewhat. So the increase in revenues is somewhat offset by a decrease in number of spaces available. Hourly patrons, again, revenue was up, hourly patrons were down. Also, to remind people, hourly patrons are basically the ones who are using the parking structure on an hourly basis rather than with a monthly permit. So it's a relatively small segment of the total users.
Roger, I had a question as I was going over this. Typically, do the hourly patrons go up during the Christmas shopping season?
After the first of the June.
Tick in December. Yes.
Okay. The answer was from Joe Morehouse. Yes, we do get a little bit of an uptick in December.
Mm-hmm. If we go to page 21, we can look at, again, the quarterly numbers. Revenue just about flat on somewhat less spaces. Again, in this quarter we had one month, the month of September, with a rate increase, but the other July and August were flat with the year before. So, in fact, the revenues are flat, or essentially are flat, based on somewhat less spaces. The overall view is that the system's fairly flat at the moment, which is not too surprising given the economy. We're not seeing any real significant decline in the use of the system at all.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear about that, according to what I'm seeing here, revenue shrunk by 1/4%.
Yes.
And hourly patrons, which, as you said, are a minority of the users of the parking system, was down 3%. So essentially, use of the system maintained at a high level, as it has been for many years.
For many years, yes. The system, overall, we have a very high demand in our system. The major parking structures during peak time, some of them are still approaching 100%, certainly over 90%. The industry standard being at capacity being about 85%. So although we're not seeing growth, we're also seeing certain areas where we are bumping into the sort of the ceiling of availability in certain locations.
I had a question. Maynard, there's an increase in hourly patrons, but a decrease in revenues. What's happening?
Well, a lot of the problem with the hourly patrons thing is that's how many cars go in and out that pay hourly. But whether they stay for half an hour or whether they stay for 8 hours depends. So you can have, as we have in Maynard.
So your question is, why are the revenues down and the usage up?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just,
I think it's
I see the
probably
drop
mostly-
in revenues about 6%, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I think it's mostly because of the completion of the construction on the dorm. Maynard structure was used for construction parking quite extensely, and a year ago especially.
Oh, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay.
And what we've noticed, and particularly that's a good example, when you've got a fair number of vehicles, and there were probably at some point up to 100 construction workers parking there during the peak of the North Quad construction. When you take those away pretty suddenly, it takes the system, people a while to get used to the fact that there are more spaces available. And we've seen that it's not an instantaneous backfill in of demand, but as word gets around and people start practicing, you'll see the usage start to go back up again. But when the dorm was completed, we did see a drop in that revenue.
Which is exactly what you're seeing with the hourly numbers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good point about how fluid and the system is. It's not a static system. It's very dynamic and it is always changing. And we are with our demand management trying to influence that change. But there are a lot of variables out there. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Moving on. We received the draft of amendments to the parking agreement for the Village Green project, the old First and Washington site. Staff has gone through and requested some changes to that amendment. Just to refresh everyone's memory, part of the agreement on the Village Green project is that they would build an approximately 250 space parking structure on that site and then build a residential apartment building on top of that, and the DDA would purchase that parking structure. So this is the agreement on how that parking structure will be managed and how that purchase will be handled. And there were some amendments requested by Village Green. Susan, you can probably
Yep, I'll do
fill
my
in.
best. You look on page 22, you see the schedule of agreements that were included as part of the most recent extension with Village Green. We are part of the first document, which is an amendment to the agreement. Under the agreement, the DDA is purchasing the deck, as Roger described.
Susan, just for clarification, the Village Green project is the one that's on the former municipal parking structure site that was built in the 1940s at First and Washington.
Yes, I should clarify. I'm sorry for that. Yes. What this is an attempt to put into details that which is agreed to in the agreement, which is the DDA will pay $9 million for a parking structure that will be designed to have a 75-year life. What this document attempts to do is to describe how the DDA can certify that, in fact, we will be receiving a structure that has a 75-year life. So you'll see in there suggested staff edits on, we would like to see the construction drawings and specs and be allowed to affect the changes. We'd like to be able to receive copies of the reports when they get their concrete pours. We'd like to see certifications for welders, all of those sort of details. And these details have been inserted. We welcome DDA members to also give us additional edits. We're working with City Attorney Mary Fowles and DDA Attorney Jerry Lax to work with the Village Green attorney, and we very much welcome your input. If you have any suggestions to add what we've already done. First of many agreements. As you look later into the schedule, there will be an operating agreement to run the parking system. There'll be a condo agreement, so the city and Village Green can figure out who's responsible for what and things, shared elements such as stairwells. So this is the first of a few. So any edits you have, we welcome your comments. Thank you.
Susan, have you received any edits from board members up to this point?
We've
Since the
heard,
Operations Committee?
no, we've heard some at the Operations Committee, but any others would be very welcome.
And again, yeah, we discussed at operations
Please.
that, yeah, I won't give you a report, but that we want to put as many eyes on this as we possibly can to get as much input on it as we possibly can. So if everybody has time, please read it and give Susan any suggestions as to changes.
Right.
Great, thanks, John. Apparently, we also discussed some new demand management strategies that staff has recommended we put into place. I think it's great.
Whatever they were.
A final note, I did with Susan and Joe and also the operations committee reviewed our 10-year plan. As we've been saying all along, the new construction of the underground parking structure and the First Division.
Again, Roger, the 10-year plan is a financial projection
Yes.
of the revenues, the projected revenues and expenses of the DDA and projects that we manage for the next 10 years.
Yes.
Which is constantly revised.
Yes. In fact, we are going to be looking at revising it probably on every 3 months to make sure it is current. It is strictly a planning document. It is not a budget. It is not anything we are locked into. But it is a...
It's also not a narrative or a vision statement. It's an actual look at hard numbers of commitments that we have, potential commitments, or projects that aren't particularly under construction, like Village Green, but expect to become under construction or come under construction.
It shows our revenues, our expenditures that we have committed to, the board has committed to, whether they be capital expenditures or grant expenditures. Essentially everything we know and our best estimates based on history on what those things will look like over a 10-year period. So we use that to plan and to look at any additional expenditures or additional revenues coming in and how that will affect our financial position to make sure that we stay on a firm financial basis. But having said that, we are starting to go through a period of about 3 or 4 years where our fund balances will be lower than they have traditionally been because we are using that money as down payment for the construction of those 2 projects. It's going to mean that we are going to have to be very tight and very careful on how we spend money. To that end, we discussed this in the executive committee. We would like in the January board meeting to have an extended operations committee report where we walk people through the 10-year plan, its assumptions, and its implications for future spending by the board. So I'm suggesting that we include that, anticipate that in our January board meeting, which I think is January 5th.
Yeah, to that end, the January 5th is the date scheduled, and I'd appreciate knowing from anybody as soon as possible how many people think they might not be available, that might have vacation plans or something else, because that's what we're tentatively going to do, is rather than have a retreat, we will simply have an extended meeting to discuss our 10-year plan.
The date was...
That's January 5th, which is our regular board meeting.
It's Wednesday.
Yeah.
And for those who, I'm sure probably everybody on the board who hasn't seen it, this is a lot of numbers. It's a lot. It's a complex spreadsheet. There's a lot of formulas and numbers in it, and it's not something you can quickly glance at and grasp. It really will, I think, help to be able to walk everybody through this so we have a good understanding of where we are and where we think we're going to be going.
Okay.
And with that, our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 17th at 11 a.m., 1 week earlier because of Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. As usual, you're on top of all the numbers.
No, he's not there.
Whether you attend the meeting or not, yeah, it still is working out. Next, we have our only resolution for today, and it's kind of a little unusual that we only have one resolution, but we have discussed it before at previous meetings and in committee, and so I wanted to bring it up before you today, and that is the idea of reconfiguring our committee structure slightly here, and it would be the main issues would be to merge the Operations and Capital Improvements Committee and create a new committee, which would be Economic Development and Communication. And the last page on the agenda has some details about what the jobs of those committees would be, and for the transportation and partnerships, they would stay pretty much the same. But then operations and capital improvements, they would really be merged, because for now, capital improvements is kind of going along on a straight track, which is we have our big capital improvement projects going, and that's going to be happening for quite some time. And so there won't be anything new that committee really has to do. So at least for a period of time, it could be merged with operations and just meet kind of all at one time. So does anybody have any questions, or, well, why don't we have, I'd like to ask for somebody to move this resolution.
Second.
Okay. And so, yes, Keith.
What would be the timeline for implementing this?
Well, we talked about this in, I think, our previous executive committee, too. We're thinking that it would really start up pretty much right away, and have it for December, that in December that we would already start to meet with the new committees. John?
Do we need to discuss when committees are going to meet, or has that been decided? So we need to decide which committees are going to meet on which days.
Right.
If anybody has any suggestions as to how we would do that.
I would like to continue on both the bricks and committees, but I can't make Wednesday meetings until 11, if you can accommodate that.
And both those currently meet at 11.
Yes, they do.
So that makes sense to continue. Which day of the
Joan
month?
had to step out for a moment, so I'm going to continue on. Yeah, and right now we have partnerships and capital improvements meeting on the same day. Again, I don't know who is interested in serving on which committees, and which might work out best for people. So again, and we don't necessarily have to decide that right at this moment, but it would be nice to get it decided as soon as possible.
So maybe, would it make sense, Susan, that people, if folks have constraints or schedules or things, to email you and give you a heads up?
And then Susan can get it figured out from there. It certainly doesn't affect passing the resolution.
With your permission, what I suggest I do, it might be easiest if I send you a recommended format for when these meetings would take place. And that way you can react to it and say, I can't make it that time, but if you move the committee to that other Wednesday, it might enable you to work together. Typically we meet on the second and the last Wednesdays, but it's also feasible that if it makes sense to shift to, say, the third Wednesday. So what I'll do is I'll give you something to react to. Does that make sense? I think that way we'll come to closure a little bit quicker.
I guess the other piece, are you planning on soliciting folks for which committees they'd like to serve on?
Next question.
Well, I'm assuming everybody wants to go to all the committees. And so when you react, because I'm going to work you hard. I'm working you hard. When you react to this, I'm going to assume that the fact that you let me know that you can't make that time, but you want to make another, I'm going to assume you're going to be indicating an interest. But starting in December, when we establish the dates, what I'd like to do is send an invitation to all of you for all of the meetings, and it'll quickly sort itself out. That's not an area of interest, or I can't make those meetings. But at least for the foreseeable future, at least as you begin to construct what that Economic Development and Communication Committee is, I would hope that at least all of you would feel welcome to attend to help give shape to what that is. And the more of you that participate, the better that committee will be. So How does that work for you? Again, it'll sort itself out soon enough that you are not interested in certain committees, but you are in others. But for the moment, I'll just invite you to all of them.
Okay, so we'll further get that all shaken out, and by December, we'll have an idea about when's the best time for everybody to meet. Sandy?
I have another bullet for Partnerships Committee.
Yeah.
Which is not really grading, but everything else that no one knows what to do with.
No, that goes without saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Recycle bin.
Yes.
Okay. Any more questions or discussion about the new committee structure? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are restructured. Thank you, everybody.
I feel better.
Right. Yes. Now, we have time for other audience participation. Is there anyone who would like to address us? Go ahead. You have.
There's an alley in question that has come to my attention, the same alley that we discussed. About a year ago, during business, McKinley people came in and put forward a recommendation to come from both sides of the area, narrowing it down to 6 feet. We came up with some plans and brought it to their attention that it would be more beneficial to keep it open, and they agreed. While this agreement went on, they went back and reneged on it by squeezing the alley. There is a trend going on between the university, which is trying to slowly come into and take some of our streets. These individuals who, for some reason, deserve to sway their agreements, I would strongly suggest to take a serious look. These are connectors between our streets, and in regard to the University of Michigan, it has its eye on Monroe Street. It is absolutely not. It's essential for us to retain our streets. It is essential for the octopus not to go any further. That's all I want. That's all I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Ray, go ahead.
Being a resident downtown, maybe I observe things more frequently in the evening time. One of the things that I brought to the attention of our city was the lights out on Broadway Bridge. After 2 months, they finally got fixed. So I took a little walk around town last week, took about a half an hour, found approximately 40 lights out. And it might not be a big deal, but nevertheless, it's indicative of how the city's being managed. What I found out was the city really only audits lights once a year. So if you're to get lights repaired, one must call in. And there is a number here in the city that can do that. But I mentioned to DDA because your merchants are affected by it. Perhaps an email could go out to them to alert them to the fact that it's only looked at once a year. And if you want a street light or a pedestrian light fixed in your area, you need to call. Okay.
Thank you. Any other members of the audience who would like to address us? Okay. Thank you. Do I have a move for adjournment? Oh, sorry.
One
John?
clarification. John had mentioned earlier about the Ann Arbor Connector feasibility study meeting that's coming up. And I see Susan had left something for me here to clarify the time.
Yeah.
It's a little different. It is indeed Monday the 15th at the Ann Arbor District Library. Open house times of starting are at 3:30 and 6:30, and presentations at 4 and 7 p.m. So 3:30 and 6:30 p.m.
Okay. Thank you. Would anyone like to move to adjourn? John?
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.